Welcome back to the Token Intelligence Show. AI is changing the way that we work, and on the show, we will talk to you about the state of the art in using AI. We'll also cut through all the noise out there and hopefully give you wisdom to become a great leader and a great worker in this new era that we live in. And today, we want to talk about AI's worst failure mode. Where do things go really bad when you're using AI to do work? And this is a subject that's near and dear to both of us, John. I want to start out with sort of going back to first principles. And there's a quote, it's probably one of my favorite quotes about writing from one of my favorite authors. And people will ask about writing, what is it like to be a writer, to, to do these things, the process and all of that. And so David McCullough, he's a renowned historian. He died not too long ago, but unbelievable writer. If you don't like history, I would actually recommend starting by reading some David McCullough.
Okay, what's like one of his top books?
The 1776, the John Adams and like the 1776 stuff, which they made a movie, series out of. Okay. People are very familiar with that. It was sort of based on his work. But he's written biographies on Harry Truman. He wrote one on the Panama Canal that's amazing. He wrote one on the Brooklyn Bridge.
Nice.
Which is the Brooklyn Bridge is incredible. And he's just, a lot of really big, thick books. Right. He wrote a shorter one on the Wright brothers, which is a great starting point. I'm obviously a huge fanboy.
Nice.
I got to see him speak in person live before he died, which was amazing. He was very interesting. He came out on stage and he didn't move. He didn't walk on the stage. He just stood in the same place with his feet planted, no notes, and talked for like an hour and a half. And it was unbelievably engaging.
That's really cool.
It was unbelievable.
Yeah.
It was counterintuitive.
Yeah. Right.
Anyways, in one of the prefaces to one of his books, he makes almost a side comment, and the comment is, writing is just a great deal of hard thinking.
Okay.
And what he's getting at, which is very true, and I think people would also say that this is true of like writing code or, doing a data analysis. But once you have something locked down in your mind, putting words on paper or writing the SQL query that's not the hard part, right? And in the best state, like what everyone loves is when that feels almost effortless, right? It's just, okay, I have this idea of what I need to do or this concept or whatever really locked down in my mind. And so actually sort of making that material in whatever form that is, for me, that's words, for you, it's data, whatever. It feels almost effortless because you're just sort of translating these well-critiqued arguments in your mind into some sort of like physical form, right?
Yeah.
And we talk about that a lot on my team when it comes to writing, because we review a lot of content from people around the company, and the stuff that's the most difficult is the stuff where it's like, I don't think that you really thought about this well, right?
Right.
And so if you start with a bad argument, everything downstream from that is problematic, right? And so again, with the example of writing, like the examples you use don't make as much sense, right? The narrative is harder to follow, right? There are just all these sorts of problems that flow downstream from it, right? But I was also thinking about data and even business decisions, right? Where if you have bad thinking up front, the downstream effects can be pretty significant. So you deal with this a lot in data, right? So tell us about that. And then you had a really good example from Amazon, actually.
So I think there's two things. There's faulty assumptions, and that's just the facts level. It's like we assume this to be true. It's not true.
Yep.
And then the second is the thinking, is we're we might have the assumptions or facts like roughly correct, but we're applying them poorly. I think I would differentiate between those two things. And I think an interesting thing about AI that most people have had the everyday experience of the AI agreeing with you.
You're
right?
absolutely right.
Exactly. And we've seen some like really bad effects from this, like people using it as kind of a personal counselor coach, and then it really encouraging them to do like something terrible.
Sure, yeah. In extreme cases, it's been very bad, right? People harming themselves or other people.
Yeah, and that's and that's terrible. It also happens like you were just saying, like leads you down a path that you kind of started it down, and it'll just keep going.
Yep.
And it does it in code, which I think is more subtle. And I'll share an example here in a minute, but I think it is the thing. It is a very human thing that it's mimicking, and it's the desire for like internal consistency. Like you would not have good AI experiences, like sycophancy aside, if it wasn't some internal consistency to the conversation. Like if it was real scattered, like people wouldn't like using it.
Yes, for sure. For sure. So you sort of default to being agreeable because constantly it's exhausting to think really well and to get all of your arguments in order, right? When we talk about this, like the map is not the territory, we distill reality down into things that are easier for us to understand and grapple with. And so if AI were constantly on every turn challenging your assumptions to make sure they were 100% correct, it would be exhausting, as that form factor over and over again.
Yeah. So that initial starting point, whatever you're doing, writing code or whatever, however you start the steering, it will naturally go that direction. I think is part of what we're saying here.
Yep, absolutely. So I want to dig into the AI stuff, but these are all, one thing that we consistently see with AI is that none of these problems are new, right?
Yeah.
And so we were talking about before the show, we were talking about, okay, what are instances where like a bad decision or bad thinking or bad assumptions caused a really big downstream problem?
All right, this is one of my favorite ones. So it's Amazon, the competitors of Amazon.
The competitors of Amazon.
So if you remember, Amazon was an online bookstore. That's what they did. And they always had a bigger vision than that. Like if you go back or you listen to read books or listen to interviews with Jeff Bezos, it was always bigger than that. But it was an online bookstore.
Yep.
And then they start getting into product. So when they start getting into product outside of books, the fundamental underlying belief that apparently all of their competitors had is really interesting. And I'll state it here in a minute. But the interesting part before I get into it is, one, did they know they had this belief? And then two, if they did, why did it take so long for it to get invalidated? And I don't know the answer to that. But the underlying belief for shopping, let's say things other than books especially, say, oh, well, people need to see it in person. Right.
I need to touch it, feel it, try it on. Whatever.
Try it on. Yeah. Yep. Especially like Amazon starts doing clothes. People are like, that's never going to work. Or even, other things.
I think about headphones, right? Like,
yeah.
Like people are, why would someone buy it if they can't try it on? Right?
Yeah, exactly. And Amazon understood that too, but they did two like crazy cool strategic things. One is they figured out that there's a proxy for this. Someone else tried it out, tried it on, whatever, left a review, said that they loved it, and that was enough for people to buy.
Yes.
Number two, so it was a two-part thing. That's really, the reviews were like absolutely critical. And they had to be trustworthy reviews. They had to be not fakeable. There's a lot that went into that. It's like, all right, cool. This person loves it. They, whatever. Great. But the second part is, that might not be enough. The second part was, you can return it. And it's easy and it's free. And like the most generous return policies, especially back in the day.
Totally.
The most generous return policies, people had never even heard of it being that generous.
Yep. I mean, I think Zappos was like the other one that was like crazy, right?
Right. So that with the proxy of you didn't try it in person, but somebody that you trusted tried it in person. Trusted by proxy and that you believed it was a real person. You believed there was no incentive to like write a fake review, whatever.
Yeah. Yep. For sure.
And that bet obviously went really well for them.
Totally. I mean, this is very true. I bought something the other day. It was one of those little extensions that you put on a zipper to make it easier to pull a tab on like a little cooler that we have. Like it broke, and I was like, oh man, like where do you get this? So I went to Amazon.
Right.
You know, and of course, there's a million options, and like the images are AI generated, and you're like, okay, what, you know, $6 versus $7, is there a better choice here?
Right.
But I just picked the one that had a high enough number of people who took a picture of it on their own zipper. We're like, this is what it looks like, and I'm like, oh, that looks fine, you know, like someone else did it. So, okay, what were the negative downstream effects of not believing that that's enough for Amazon's competitors?
Yeah, I mean, I think they were huge. I mean, Walmart struggled like forever.
Yeah,
like I think in the last like couple years they kind of got it now. Like they've kind of caught up. You remember Jet?
Yeah,
Jet.com.
Oh, yeah. Huge.
I mean, Walmart bought them, and that still wasn't quite enough. For whatever reason, I don't know the details of what happened there, but I think they missed out on this very new channel that, again, was insignificant for a while. And if Walmart had asked all their competitors, like, how many online sales do you do? You know, Kmart's like, like not many. He's like, all right, we don't need it. You know, you can imagine, like, in whatever circle at the time, it's like, all right, well, it's fine.
Yeah.
I
was going to say, I think that if we go back to first principles, there's sort of, I would say, two things that jump out to me here. One is that this is very interesting, actually, now that I think about it. I think what Jeff Bezos and the Amazon team thought really well about was human nature.
Yeah.
Right? Because what you're describing with, like, it's enough for someone, the review is enough, is a tale as old as time. I actually remember I bought Apple AirPods Max, which are the over-ears. Yeah. And I debated the decision for a very long time. I mean, I think over a year, because they're super expensive, right? They still are very expensive. And, you know, but I travel a good bit for work, and, you know, and I really appreciate high-quality audio when I'm listening to music. And I had a pair of headphones that I had for a very long time, you know, and they were getting, you know, sort of, I think one of the things like broke, they were still usable. Right. Anyways, I had a friend who had AirPods Max, you know, over ear headphones. And I said, he was wearing them on a call or something. Okay. Yeah. And I was like, I want to buy them, but like, it's so expensive. Like, I don't know. And he just said, it was kind of funny. He's like, I debated for like a year to buy these. He's like, someone convinced me that it was worth it. And he's like, they're just worth it. He's like, they are that good. The audio quality's good. Right. The long-term comfort, you can wear them on a 6-hour flight. Right. He's like, everything. He's like, it really is like, he's like, it's one of those products that just, it's so expensive, but then when you use it, you're like, yeah, it's probably worth it. And he's like, and they're so sturdy. He's like, I mean, and I've had the same experience. That is, you know, a very, very similar thing to like reading multiple reviews and getting validation from another person. So I think the Amazon team thought really well about human nature. We know that this is enough, right? And maybe they didn't know how much of it was enough or what the thresholds were on the price that you would pay for a certain product or whatever, right? Right. And then on the flip side, I think the bad thinking for their competitors was not questioning their assumptions, right? Like,
well, and then I assume they looked around to their perceived competitors, like Kmart or Walmart or whoever. And they're like, like they're not really doing it either. We're fine.
Yeah. So, one, first principles of like understanding human nature and translating that. And then two, like the failure to question your assumptions and take a lot of things for granted based on what you can see right in front of you, not, you know, necessarily looking to the future. So AI is problematic here, I think. Right. Not I think. I know that it can be very problematic because if you bring bad thinking to the table, right? So let's look at both of those examples that we just talked about, right? So a bad assumption about human nature, right? People need to, and if we play this out, actually, it's kind of funny. I think a lot of our listeners can imagine what a conversation would be, right? So I open up GPT or Claude and I start saying, I think people really need to really be convicted about a purchase decision. Like it's really powerful for them to have a physical experience with the product, right?
Yeah.
Is
Yeah,
AI
exactly.
going to say, actually, you need to step back and think about,
Right.
what is the threshold of validation that someone needs?
Right.
Like, no, it's going to say, absolutely. Like,
Right.
and maybe even pull a statistic of like, if someone can try something on, they're 10 times more likely to purchase it, whatever, which is like, okay, there may be situations where that's true, but
Right.
in aggregate across like Amazon scale e-commerce, it's not going to ask you, it's not going to question that.
Right. Well, and same thing with because we just talked about competitors with, Walmart, Kmart. And Walmart's like, all right, fine, we'll do a survey. We'll survey all of our customers, and then they have these questions in there like, would you rather shop online or in person? Like things like that.
Totally.
That from a survey construction, like it's a bad survey.
Yep.
But for them, it's like, look, all of our customers said they'd rather shop in person.
Yep. Yeah, totally. And so I'll be very interested to see how this plays out because I think it will probably be more problematic than we think it is.
Right.
Because it's a lot of really hard work. And I think there are opposing forces here.
Right.
It's a lot of hard work to get the thinking correct up front.
Right.
And because AI is so high velocity and like low barrier to like produce something or like or feel like you're making progress, it doesn't reward in the actual experience of using AI, it does not reward critical thinking, right? You get the same path whether or not you bring that to the table, right?
Correct. Right.
And I'll just give one example. I'll just give one personal example. We have a content agent that we've built. It's really cool and super helpful and does all these awesome things. And using it almost every day. And the thing that I've realized is it's most powerful when I come with a very well thought out thesis.
Sure.
Right? And things move much more quickly. And in fact, like the cost of how many tokens I burn for like a project goes down dramatically because of the sycophantic nature of AI. Using it to get to the thesis is actually time consuming and cumbersome.
Right.
I think you can actually do that well. I think it's possible to do that well, but it's a very specific skill set to leverage AI to like push back on you and go back and forth on sort of getting to a thesis, not exploring an idea or even brainstorming, right? I'm talking about sort of like building a concrete argument. Again, you can get it to do that, but that's not the natural path. You have to proactively sort of steer it in that direction. You had an experience just this week with someone on your team that's sort of a prime example of this thinking and then agreeable AI leading you down the path.
Right. So actually, I actually had two. I haven't told you about one of them. But I'll start with the one we talked about.
Okay.
And this was a funny one. So one of my team members was working. Somebody reported a bug or an issue of like, hey, like these numbers look wrong. Stated with like, and I think it's this. Like, I think this is the problem. Some kind of like a matching algorithm. It's like, these numbers look wrong. I think our matching algorithm is off.
Yep. Just a normal like, okay, yeah, this looks off.
Yeah. And it was a reasonable assumption. It, like I looked at it personally. Yeah, probably so. So a team member like grabs all that context from the reported issue, puts that in AI, pulls up the code base, starts working, blah, blah, gets through to like adjusting that algorithm, blah, blah. And, turns out that didn't help. Like didn't solve the problem, didn't help. And then I jumped in with him. I was like, all right, let's look at this. I kind of did the same thing. Yeah, we probably just missed something, like worked down the same thing. Like, let's look at the algorithm again, blah, blah, blah. Like, still, like, didn't get to the right answer. And then I went back, and I felt dumb. Like, we did something wrong here. Like, there's a problem stated with a proposed solution. We didn't investigate the problem outside of the proposed solution. And AI further encouraged us to go down the matching algorithm
Yep.
route.
Yep.
But that wasn't the only route. And this is true before AI. Like when a problem's stated, you should always try to reproduce it. Always, every time.
Yes.
You know?
Especially if for things technical, anything technical,
Yeah.
right? Like I can't reproduce the
And
issue.
it was a data problem that you could visually see. So I didn't need to reproduce it because I didn't believe it was an issue. I believed it was an issue. So that's one thing. There's some bug. I'm like, doesn't like, is it really a bug? Didn't need to validate that. Knew there was something wrong. But there's still power in reproducing it, not because you want to know if it's an issue because you know it is, but because of the steps that happen prior to that.
Yep.
That you're building this context of like when we investigate this, we have all 5 of the things in context that gets to calculate this number, for example.
Yep.
So I thought that was really interesting, and I think it's going to be a problem for everybody.
Yep.
Because if the instruction is to the human or to the AI loop or however you do troubleshooting nowadays, that's going to lead humans and AIs down the wrong rabbit hole every time.
Yep.
If you are steering or stating the context wrong.
Yep.
All right. So in the positive example, had this project, which I still don't know what to think about this. So if you are building something net new, pretty much in any technology, I'll speak about data, is you always want to leverage as much of existing available work as possible and then add your 2 cents. That's always the best way to work.
Yep.
So if you're in open source land, it's like, all right, let's do the research. We want to leverage like this library or this bit of code or whatever.
Yep.
And obviously you want to use good libraries and people that have done things, solve things the right way.
Yep.
But especially in tech communities, people kind of know. Like
Yeah.
you can look at how many stars something has to get a sense for.
Sure.
And then obviously inspect the code. But that's the right way to work and pretty established. Interesting. So we're working on a project with a client, and that's what we were doing. Like, all right, we want to use this library, this component for like this piece of the tech, and use this and this, and we're gonna like stitch together like we normally would. Here's the edges that we know that we need to do ourselves because it's a unique situation,
Yep.
et cetera.
Yep.
So went down that road using AI around it. Like results are like, like they're fine, but we're not very happy with them. We feel like there's like some extra code and it's not quite behaving right. So one of the things we did this week is we drastically stripped down the use case, stripped out a bunch of like features and things we wanted to do, made it very specific. Like we want to move data from A to B, and strip back like, well, it doesn't have to do this, doesn't have to do this.
Yep.
And then stated all that very clearly and had it just work from moving data from A to B, and gave it some like use Python, like pretty basic scaffolding.
Yep.
And it was awesome. Like it didn't leverage, like the right thing to do is to leverage like, oh, well, this library is really good at this and this. Like,
Yep.
But at least in this instance, it was awesome.
Yeah.
Like,
yeah.
and it's a different way to think.
It's a different way to, well, I think my big takeaway from the second story is that, well, I have a takeaway from the first story, but takeaway from the second story is that the mileage varies a lot when there are areas of ambiguity in a plan and AI fills in the gaps.
Yep.
Right?
Right.
And especially when you're talking about a complex system that's going to use components from different open source projects and other things like that. And so it's like you get to the end and it doesn't feel quite right. It's like, okay, well, in a complex system, generally they work really well if you're very, very opinionated about it.
Right.
And, you know, that is not the natural disposition of AI, right? Is to handle ambiguity that way. It's going to tend towards sort of an amalgamation of like what it believes your intent to be and then follow that path, right?
Right. Which, to be fair, I did change 2 variables. One is I reduced and sharpened the goal.
Yep.
Which is super important.
Which is called good thinking.
Yeah. Reduced and sharpened the goal, and didn't truly do an A/B test of like, well, what if we went down the same path with the tech before it with a reduced sharpened goal? Sure, I'm sure I would have gotten better results. But I mean, one of the metrics that I use in like good quality software is like, how do we accomplish the thing we want to do in the least number of lines of code?
Yep.
Right. And based on what we were able to do, I can't imagine it being net like less lines of code, even with the abstractions.
Mm-hmm.
But and then looking back on it, we might not have actually had quite the right toolkit as far as like these weren't probably the ideal like libraries and stuff to use.
Yep.
But it was such an interesting exercise because you think like you know how hard something is, or you think you know how to do something, and like fundamentally like would have always worked that way, like for the last 15 years. And AI changed that like overnight, you know?
Right. Yeah, I think so. Let's just talk through some lessons here. So one is don't outsource your core thinking to AI.
For sure.
You know, I mean, and even if you use AI, because it's interesting. I've seen multiple posts, like read these really interesting long posts from people, who write on whatever topic, a lot of it about AI.
Right.
But they'll say, I used AI to help me like think through this post, right? It's really fascinating to me, and I actually reached out to one of them and asked them how they did it. They didn't respond to me, but they're very famous.
Maybe they will now.
Yeah, maybe they will. Yeah, exactly. We'll have them on the show.
Exactly.
But that's really interesting to me because my guess would be that if they're a really good writer, they're actually really disciplined in. So actually, I'll put a sharp point on this. The people who I know who are really good writers who use AI heavily tell AI it's wrong more often than they agree with it.
Okay.
Right? Just constantly, that is not right. Or they're questioning assumptions, right? Or they're questioning output that the AI, brings back.
Right.
Which I think is actually correct. Like that's the right way if you're working through something, is for the conversation to be more adversarial is probably too strong of a word.
Right.
But sort of not going down this path, right? But it's because you are being a very critical thinker, and critical thinking pushes back against sycophancy, right?
Which is interesting, and this is new for me. Totally agree with that. But I find if I'm doing that too much, then I probably frame something wrong, and I don't have the right goal, and I don't have the right goal set for what I wanted to do.
Agreed.
And often it makes sense to start over, reframe, and then you don't have to be constantly like steering. Because I get caught in that, and I think people get caught in the like, I'm thinking hard, I'm interacting, I'm telling it it's wrong. That's good, but if you're doing it too much, then like start over. Like you're just you
totally
start
agree.
over.
Totally agree.
Yeah.
I think the other thing in this is, it sounds obvious, but I don't think it is. Someone once said this to me, it's really stuck with me. They said the problem is the way we see the problem. And that goes back to your first example, which was one of my takeaways from the first example you gave, right? Where you didn't separate the problem and the proposed solution.
Yep.
AI is actually a great tool if you're very explicit to say, what are different ways to think about this problem, right?
Yeah,
completely devoid of a proposed solution, right?
Exactly.
And it can be very helpful for that. But again, that's going back to being very deliberate about steering the AI, not just following the path of least resistance.
Yep.
All right. Don't outsource your thinking, and we'll catch you on the next show.
Yep.